The Galactic Concord called it a mercy. That was the word they used in the official resolution, the one read aloud by the Concord High Speaker, before an assembled gallery of 412 species, broadcast on every relay network in the known galaxy, archived in every major civilization's public record, for the stated purpose of transparency and historical clarity. The word mercy appeared 3 times in the resolution's text, as if repetition could make it true. As if saying a thing kindly enough, with sufficiently careful language, could change what the thing actually was. What it actually was: the expulsion of humanity from the Galactic Concord, the revocation of Earth's diplomatic standing, the seizure of all human-operated infrastructure within Concord space, 12 relay stations, 41 mining installations, 2 research outposts, and the colony ship UES Providence, which was mid-voyage at the time, and whose 800 colonists were transferred to Concord custody before their vessel was impounded, and the declaration of a 500 light-year exclusion zone around the Sol system, inside which no Concord member species was permitted to trade, communicate, or establish any form of relationship with humanity. A quarantine, dressed in the language of mercy. The charge that justified it was conspiracy to destabilize the Concord political structure, a charge rooted in the fact that humanity, in its 14 years of Concord membership, had done something no species in 900 years of Concord history had done. It had made friends, not diplomatic relationships, not trade partnerships sealed by committee, genuine friendships between individual humans and individual members of other species, that had produced an informal network of goodwill and mutual support that the Concord's oldest power blocks had eventually recognized as something they could not control, and had therefore decided to destroy. Admiral Sarah Chen had been in the Concord gallery when the resolution was read. Not as a military officer. She had no military standing in the Concord chamber. The United Earth Navy was not permitted official representation in Concord proceedings. That was left to the diplomatic corps. She was there as an observer in the public gallery because she had requested observer access for the session, and it had been granted, because no one in the Concord bureaucracy had thought about why a senior military officer would want to observe a diplomatic session about human trade relations. She had sat in the gallery for 3 hours and 20 minutes and listened to 412 species representatives respond to the roll call with their vote, aye or nay, on the expulsion resolution. 389 ayes, 23 nays. 0 abstentions because the Concord's rules on resolutions of this category did not permit abstention. You voted or you were counted as an aye by default, which was a procedural provision that Chen had noted, with a cold sort of attention, was very well designed for exactly this kind of majority action. The 23 nays had been, she would later learn, the species with whom individual humans had built individual friendships. The ones who had voted against, not because a committee told them to, but because someone they personally respected had looked them in the eye and asked them not to. 23 out of 412. When the High Speaker announced the resolution passed, the gallery had done something Chen had not expected. It had applauded. Not politely. Not with the restrained formal acknowledgement of a body that had executed a difficult but necessary administrative decision. It applauded the way an audience applauds when something they have been watching build for a long time finally resolves the way they wanted. With relief. With satisfaction. With an undercurrent of something Chen would spend the flight home trying to name and would eventually identify as pleasure. They had enjoyed it. They had wanted this. Chen sat in the gallery and did not move and did not speak and let the applause go through her the way cold water goes through you. Not painful, but clarifying, stripping everything away until only the essential thing remained. The essential thing was this: the Galactic Concord, in its 900-year history, had never expelled a member species. It had issued censures, trade restrictions, diplomatic sanctions, the full toolkit of an institution that preferred administrative pressure to direct confrontation. But it had never expelled anyone. The Concord's entire identity was built on the premise of inclusion, of bringing civilizations together under a common framework, of the principle that the galaxy was better managed as a cooperative, except for humanity. Humanity got expelled, and the gallery applauded. Chen flew home on a transport that had been impounded twice and released only because it was carrying diplomatic personnel. and she sat in the back and thought about the 41 mining installations and the 12 relay stations and the 800 colonists in Concord custody and the 500 light-year exclusion zone that had just been placed around her species, like a fence around a dangerous animal. She thought about the 23 species that had voted no. She thought about the word mercy, used 3 times in a resolution that had just locked humanity in its room and thrown away the key. And she thought about what she was going to do about it. Not whether. What? She had been thinking about this since 2 months ago, when the intelligence reports had first suggested the expulsion was coming. Since the moment she had understood that diplomacy was not going to stop it because diplomacy was what they were using to do it. She had been building something in her mind for 2 months the way she built everything. Quietly. Completely. From first principles. Until the shape of it was clear enough to begin. The transport hit the jump point. The stars blurred. And Admiral Sarah Chen, the most dangerous woman in a species that had just been thrown out of the galaxy, went home to start building an empire. The exclusion zone was a sentence. But it was also, Chen understood in the weeks after she returned to Earth, a gift. Not a comfortable gift. Not the kind you're grateful for immediately. The kind that costs you everything first and only reveals its value after you've paid the price. The exclusion zone meant no Concord trade, no access to the interstellar markets that humanity had been integrated into for 14 years, no Concord technology imports, no Concord communication infrastructure, no Concord shipping lanes, no Concord anything. It also meant no Concord oversight, no Concord regulations on what humanity could research, no Concord treaties limiting what humanity could build, no Concord inspectors, reviewers, approval committees, or bureaucratic gates. For 14 years, Earth's integration into the Concord had been contingent on compliance with a regulatory framework so extensive that it had, Chen had long believed, been deliberately designed to keep developing civilizations in a state of managed dependency. Every technology Earth wanted to advance required Concord approval. Every ship design had to be submitted for review. Every weapons system, even defensive ones, required a committee vote. It was framed as safety and stability. It functioned as a leash. The expulsion cut the leash. Chen walked into the emergency session of the United Earth Council 2 weeks after returning home. She sat at the witness table and she looked at the assembled leadership of every nation on the planet, and she said 5 words before any question was asked. They have done us a favor. The room's reaction was complicated. The President of the United States looked at her like a woman trying to determine whether the person in front of her was profoundly wise or had suffered some kind of break with reality. The European Council representative openly said, "Admiral, with respect, we've lost 14 years of economic integration and had 800 people taken from their ship. We've lost what they allowed us to have," Chen said, "which was always less than we were capable of. And we're going to get the 800 back, all of them. But not by asking politely." She looked around the table. "I need authority. I need budget. And I need everyone in this room to understand that what I'm going to propose is not a diplomatic strategy. It's a construction project, the largest in human history. And at the end of it, the Galactic Concord is going to look at what we've built, and they're going to understand that the exclusion zone was the worst decision they ever made." She presented the plan for 6 hours. The Council approved it that evening. What followed was 18 months that Earth would later call the founding. 18 months that people who lived through them remembered not as a time of triumph, but as a time of absolute, relentless work that asked more of more people than anything in human history. The Concord exclusion zone covered 500 light-years around Sol, but the Concord's maps only extended so far. Beyond the edge of the Concord's charted territory, in the regions the Concord called the Deep Fringe, the systems too remote or too sparse to bother with, there was space. Unclaimed space. Space where the Concord's rules did not apply, because the Concord had never gotten around to caring about it. Chen called it the Void. She was going to build in it. The first expedition left Earth 14 months after the expulsion. 17 ships, 8,000 people, carrying the most concentrated collection of scientific, engineering, and industrial expertise ever assembled aboard a fleet that small. Their destination was a star system 63 light-years beyond the Concord's charted boundary, which Chen's navigation team had designated Outpost 1. The system had 4 planets, 2 of which were resource-rich, and one of which was marginally habitable with significant atmospheric modification work. It had no strategic value by Concord standards, too far from major lanes, too small for a significant colony. It had exactly what Chen needed: raw materials and no one watching. The second expedition, 4 months later, went in a different direction. Outpost 2. Then 3. Chen was not building one colony. She was building a network, a distributed infrastructure of human installations, spread across the void, each one outside Concord space, each one beyond the exclusion zone, each one connected to the others by a relay communication system that the Concord didn't know existed, because the Concord had been built on the assumption that species outside the zone had no meaningful way to communicate over interstellar distances without using Concord infrastructure. Humanity had spent the 14 months since Expulsion building its own. Major Tom Duke Reeves, the same Reeves who had spent 2 years inside an asteroid for the Aegis project, who had subsequently been given a promotion and a new assignment, and who was now Colonel Reeves, heading the infrastructure division of Chen's expansion program, oversaw the relay network construction with the specific enthusiasm of a man who had spent 2 years underground and was extremely motivated by open space. His team laid relay nodes at 18 light-year intervals across 11 expansion vectors. Within 14 months of the first expedition, Chen could send a message from Earth to any outpost in the void and receive a reply in under 40 minutes. But the relay network was not the achievement that changed everything. The achievement that changed everything was the drive. Human FTL technology, at the time of Expulsion, was functional but slow by Concord standards, a consequence of 14 years of being prevented from developing beyond the baseline level that the Concord permitted for developing civilizations. The maximum safe transit speed was approximately 3 light-years per day. Concord military vessels operated at 8. Concord Express couriers operated at 15. Dr. Emily Park, the same Park who had managed the Aegis grid systems, who had then taken a 2-year leave from Space Force to work with a private research consortium, and who had 3 months ago submitted a paper through Chen's classified research network that had caused every physicist who read it to call someone else and say, "You need to read this," had cracked the geometric torsion principle that Concord regulations had classified as a restricted technology for member species. The new drive did not operate at 3 light-years per day. It operated at 42. At 42 light-years per day, the 500 light-year exclusion zone was not a barrier. It was a 12-day trip. At 42 light-years per day, the entire Concord's charted territory, 12,000 light-years across, was accessible in under a year of continuous travel. At 42 light-years per day, humanity's exclusion from the Concord space was a political fiction, because physics did not recognize the resolution of 412 species committees. Chen read Park's preliminary specifications and felt something she rarely felt: the specific quality of certainty that arrives not gradually but all at once, when a puzzle that has been incomplete for a long time suddenly has all its pieces. She called Park directly. "How long to full production capability?" she asked. "First fleet retrofit in 4 months," Park said. "Full fleet conversion in 12. "Retrofit the exploration ships first," Chen said. "I need them moving before the fleet." "What are the exploration ships looking for?" Park asked. Chen looked at the void map on her display, the expanding network of outposts, the relay lines, the 11 expansion vectors reaching outward from Sol into unclaimed space. "Allies," she said. "The Concord excluded us. But the Concord doesn't speak for the whole galaxy. There are species out there they never bothered to contact because they were too far away or too small or too inconvenient. We're going to find them." She paused. "We're going to find the 23. Park was quiet for a moment. "The 23 species that voted against the expulsion?" Park said. "They told us something important when they voted no," Chen said. "They told us they already knew us, already trusted us. The Concord never gave us credit for the network we'd built in 14 years of membership. They thought they were expelling a civilization. They actually expelled a diplomatic foundation." She looked at the map. "We're going to build on it." The first contact mission launched on a Tuesday, 4 months after Park's drive went into the exploration fleet. 42 light-years per day changed everything about first contact. In the Concord era, diplomatic missions traveled at Concord-permitted speeds through Concord shipping lanes, which meant they arrived when the Concord's infrastructure allowed, and were, implicitly, visible to everyone on the network. Contact was always public, always on the record, always subject to the kind of scrutiny that the Concord exercised over every interaction between its member species and anyone else. The system was designed, Chen had come to believe, to make sure that no species built relationships the Concord couldn't monitor and moderate. At 42 light-years per day on a ship that didn't use Concord lanes, a diplomatic mission arrived where it intended to arrive and was visible only to the people it was visiting. The first mission went to the Sarathi homeworld. The Sarathi were the insectoid species whose duty officer, Vel Than 3 years ago, had made the unauthorized call that had brought the Ares to the Varath colony. That act had resulted in Vel Than being formally censured by the Concord, a censure that had been recorded in the Concord's public archive and which had, among certain species, become a quiet point of discussion about what the Concord's rules actually protected and who they actually protected it from. The Sarathi government had voted nay on the expulsion resolution. They had done it at professional cost. 3 of their diplomatic staff had been reassigned after the vote. Chen's mission arrived at Sarathi space unannounced, on a ship that the Sarathi censors classified as unknown design and unknown origin, until the crew broadcast their identification on standard frequencies. United Earth Republic diplomatic vessel. Request permission to meet. United Earth Republic. Not United Earth Navy, not Earth Delegation. United Earth Republic, the new name that the Council had adopted 4 months after the expulsion, because they had decided that if they were starting over, they were going to start with clarity about what they were building. Not just a planet, a republic, a governed civilization with a defined structure and a defined intention. The Sarathi government received the mission in the 3rd day after arrival. Chen led it personally. She sat across the table from 3 senior Sarathi officials, including a diplomat named Vel Than, promoted, despite the censure, by a government that had apparently decided his judgment was sound regardless of what the Concord thought. And she said without preamble, "You voted no. I'm here because of that. I'm not here to ask you to do anything that costs you more than you've already paid. I'm here to offer you something." She slid a data package across the table. That is the specification for a drive system that operates at 42 light-years per day. It is yours. Free. No conditions. No treaty required. You can build it yourself, you can tell no one, and we will never ask anything in return. She looked at them steadily. That's the opening offer. There is no catch. What I want in exchange for nothing is for you to understand that humanity is not what the Concord said we were. Vel Than looked at the data package. Why? He asked. Why give us this with nothing in return? Because the Sarathi duty officer who called us 3 years ago saved 4 million lives, Chen said. Because the 3 diplomats who were reassigned after your government voted no paid a price for doing the right thing. Because we believe in reciprocity. She met his eyes. And because we're going to need friends who trust us before we need allies who owe us. The Sarathi government took 3 days to deliberate. They accepted. The second contact mission went to the Varath. The third went to the Oran, a small civilization of 6 systems near the Concord's inner fringe, who had voted nay and had subsequently been pressured by 3 larger member species to change their position for the next formal review. They hadn't changed it. They had instead quietly asked a Concord trade partner to pass along a message to any human they encountered, which was, "We're still no. Find us." Chen found them. Over the following 8 months, 7 contact missions visited 11 of the 23 species. The pattern was the same each time. Arrive unannounced, bring something of genuine value freely given, ask for nothing immediate except the chance to build a relationship. No pressure, no obligations, no treaty frameworks. Chen had spent 2 years in Concord diplomatic structures, and she understood, with the clarity of someone who had been managed by a system from the inside, how those structures worked. They bound people in obligation before they bound them in genuine connection. She was doing the opposite. Connection first, structure after. The results were extraordinary. By the time 8 months had passed, 7 species had accepted the drive specifications. 3 of them had independently asked, without prompting, whether there was a formal alliance framework they could join. Chen had said, "Not yet, but soon. Give us 6 more months." She needed 6 months because she needed the void to be ready first. Outpost 1 had grown from a 17-ship expedition to a functioning colony of 12,000 people, with full manufacturing capability, an orbital shipyard that had so far launched 31 vessels, and a defensive installation that the Concord's intelligence services, if they had known about it, would have found deeply alarming. Outposts 2 through 7 were at various stages of development behind 1. Outpost 8, the largest, positioned at the strategic junction of 3 expansion vectors, was under construction and would, when complete, be the largest artificial installation humanity had ever built. Chen called it the Nexus, and the Nexus was where she intended to hold the founding meeting of something that had never existed before in the history of the known galaxy. Not an alliance, not a coalition of convenience. Something with a name and a structure and a set of principles that had been written not by a committee of 412 species with competing interests, but by the people who had voted no when it would have been easier to vote yes. She called it the Free Worlds Compact. The meeting was 6 months away. She had 6 months to finish building the room. The Galactic Concord noticed something was wrong 14 months after the expulsion, not because of the void outposts. Those were beyond the edge of Concord surveyed space, and the Concord had no mechanism for detecting activity in regions it had never charted. Not because of the drive development. Dr. Park's work was conducted entirely within human space, inside the exclusion zone, and the Concord's surveillance of the exclusion zone was limited to the passive sensor sweeps that confirmed humanity was contained. They noticed because of the Sarathi. Specifically, they noticed because the Sarathi began acting differently. Less responsive to Concord administrative requests, slower to submit required filings, declining 2 invitations to Concord economic working groups. None of these were dramatic violations. The Sarathi were still full Concord members, still paying their assessments, still technically compliant. But the pattern was noticeable to someone paying close enough attention, and the Concord Senior Administrator for Interspecies Relations, a being called High Coordinator Vrethnal, who had been one of the principal architects of the Expulsion Resolution, and who had been watching humanity's exclusion with the satisfied attention of someone who had solved a problem, noticed. He ordered a full audit of every contact between the 23 nay-voting species and any known human entity over the past 14 months. The audit came back with a finding that Vrethnal had not expected. There were no such contacts on record, no communications through Concord relays, no ship identification records, no trade transactions, no diplomatic exchanges through any registered channel. Nothing, which was on its face the desired outcome. The exclusion zone was working, humanity was isolated. The nay-voting species were staying in line because they had no way to maintain contact with their human acquaintances. But Vrethnal was not a being who found absence of evidence reassuring. He had been in Concord administration for 60 years. He understood that absence of evidence in a comprehensive audit meant one of 2 things. Either the thing you were looking for wasn't happening, or it was happening in a way you couldn't see. He tasked a covert intelligence team to look harder. They found nothing. No human transmissions on any known frequency, no human ships on any registered lane, no human presence anywhere in the Concord's surveyed space, which told Vrethnal exactly what he needed to know. Humans were communicating through channels that didn't exist in the Concord's registry. Humans were moving through space that wasn't on the Concord's maps. Humans were doing something in the dark, and whatever it was organized enough to be invisible. He called an emergency session of the Senior Administrative Council. The exclusion zone has not contained them, he said. It has accelerated them. The Council's response was to dispatch a survey fleet, 30 ships equipped with extended-range sensors, tasked with mapping the region beyond the Concord's charted territory in the direction the intelligence analysis suggested human activity was concentrated. The survey fleet departed on a Thursday. Chen knew about it by Friday, because the Sarathi, who had the drive specs for a 42 light-year per day ship, also had, as of 2 months ago, a covert intelligence sharing arrangement with the United Earth Republic's diplomatic network. Not a formal treaty, not anything on any record, just a working relationship between professionals who trusted each other. And the Sarathi had a source inside the Concord administrative apparatus who had flagged the survey fleet dispatch within hours. Chen was at Outpost 5 when the intelligence arrived. She was there overseeing the final construction phase of the Nexus. specifically the Great Hall where the founding meeting of the Free Worlds Compact would take place in 6 weeks. The hall was large enough to seat representatives of 40 civilizations, which was an optimistic target count that Chen had set, knowing that 23 was the guaranteed minimum, and believing that the other 22 would come when they saw who else was attending. She read the intelligence report. She looked at the construction timeline. 6 weeks, she said to Colonel Reeves, who was beside her on the construction deck. The survey fleet will reach the outer boundary of our outpost network in approximately 4 weeks at standard Concord survey speeds, Reeves said. He had already done the math because that was what Reeves did. They'll find 1, 2, and 3 before the meeting date. Can we accelerate the meeting? We can hold it in 4 weeks if the hall is the only thing not finished. He paused. I can have the seats in by then. The ceremonial trim can wait. The trim can wait. Chen agreed. She thought for a moment. When the survey fleet finds the outposts, she said, what do they see? 7 functioning human installations independent of Concord infrastructure, operating well beyond the exclusion zone boundary, Reeves said. Plus relay network infrastructure, plus 31 ships of unregistered design based out of the Outpost 1 shipyard. Unregistered because they're new designs, Chen said. Designs we didn't need Concord approval for because we're not in the Concord. Yes. Good. She looked at the hall frame being assembled around them. Let them find it, I want them to find it. She turned to Reeves. Send word to all our contact species. Advance the meeting by 2 weeks. New date, 21 days. Tell them the reason. She paused. Tell them the Concord is coming to look at what we've built. I want them to be here when it arrives. You want the Concord survey fleet to arrive and find a founding meeting of a new interstellar organization in progress? Reeves said. I want them to arrive and find the meeting already done, Chen said. The compact already signed. The member species already committed, so that when Vrethnal reads the survey report he doesn't see a human construction project, he sees a fait accompli. She went back to watching the construction. The hall seats 40, Reeves said. Do you think 23 will actually come? 23 will come, Chen said. And when they see the hall seats 40, some of them are going to ask who fills the other 17 seats. She allowed herself a small smile. That's a question I want people asking. 26 species came, not 23, 26. 3 species that had voted aye on the expulsion, not nay voters. Actual aye voters who had gone along with the majority 14 months ago, and who had spent 14 months watching the Concord's behavior toward the nay-voting species and had drawn their own conclusions. Had made private contact through intermediaries in the weeks leading up to the meeting, asking if attendance was open or invitation only. Chen had said, open. Always open. The meeting is for anyone who believes in what we're building. She had not expected 3 aye voters. She had hoped, but she had not expected. The founding meeting of the Free Worlds Compact convened at the Nexus on a Tuesday morning, Nexus time, which ran on Earth's calendar because Earth had built the station and Earth's habits die hard, with representatives of 26 species seated in a hall that was structurally complete, but whose ceremonial trim had not been installed, and whose bare metal walls were, Chen thought, more honest than marble would have been. This was not a ceremony of established power. This was the beginning of something. It should look like a beginning. Chen spoke first. She had written the opening herself, rewritten it 6 times and then thrown out all 6 versions and spoken from the principles underneath them. 14 months ago, she said, the Galactic Concord told 26 civilizations, in various ways through various mechanisms, that their voices were less important than administrative convenience. They told 12 of you that your vote had professional consequences. They told 3 of your governments that their diplomatic positions would be reviewed for inconvenient alignment. They told humanity to sit in a room by ourselves and be grateful for the mercy. She looked around the hall. We did not sit in the room, she said. We built a new one, and we invited everyone who understood why the old room needed replacing. The Compact's founding document had been drafted over 3 months by a team of 29 human diplomats, legal scholars, and political architects, reviewed and amended by representatives of 11 species during the contact phase, and was, by the time it was read into the record at the Nexus meeting, a document that said, with the careful precision of people who had studied what the Concord's founding document said and where they had been weaponized. Members of the Free Worlds Compact maintained absolute sovereignty over their own territory, resources, and governance. The Compact provided a framework for trade, mutual defense, communication, and technological exchange that was entirely voluntary and entirely transparent. No species could be expelled. No vote could be held on the standing of any member. The only exit from the Compact was voluntary withdrawal, and it began, unlike the Concord's document, not with a preamble about stability and order, but with a single sentence. The Free Worlds Compact exists because the right to exist freely cannot be conditional. 26 signatures. The Concord's survey fleet arrived at Outpost 3 6 days after the signing. The survey commander, a career officer following his orders, had been expecting to find a human construction project in an uncharted region. He had been expecting, at most, a series of mining and industrial outposts, possibly some relay infrastructure, a collection of ships that the intelligence estimate had suggested were militarily significant, but manageable. He had not been expecting the message that was waiting for him at Outpost 3, cued to transmit automatically on standard Concord frequencies upon detection of a Concord ship in range. It was from Admiral Sarah Chen, sent from the Nexus station 14 days earlier. It read, "Commander, you are currently standing outside the territory of the Free Worlds Compact. The installation you are surveying is a member installation of the Compact, operating under the sovereignty of its founding treaty. Your presence at this location is not a violation. You are in unclaimed space and you are welcome to observe. I would like, however, to formally notify the Galactic Concord of the following. 1. The Free Worlds Compact was founded 21 days ago with 26 member civilizations, 11 of which are current Galactic Concord members. By the terms of the Compact's founding treaty, their Compact membership does not conflict with or supersede their Concord membership. They remain members of both. The Concord is free to draw whatever conclusions it wishes from this fact. 2. The Free Worlds Compact's territory currently encompasses 43 installations across the void, the unclaimed regions beyond Concord charted space, plus the sovereign territory of 11 member civilizations within Concord space. This territory will continue to expand as new outposts are established and new members join. 3. The Free Worlds Compact extends an open offer to any Galactic Concord member species that wishes to add Compact membership to their existing Concord standing. There are no political requirements, no loyalty oaths, and no conditions. The door is open. 4. The 800 colonists from the UES Providence who have been held in Concord custody for 14 months are citizens of the United Earth Republic and members of the Free Worlds Compact. We formally request their return. This is the first of 3 formal requests. If 3 formal requests do not produce a response, we will make other arrangements. The survey commander read the message twice. He composed a response acknowledging receipt and transmitted it back to Concord Central. Then he stood on his bridge and looked at the installation in front of him. The functioning colony, the orbital shipyard, the ships of a design he had never seen before. And he thought about what High Coordinator Vrethnal was going to say when this message arrived. He was glad he was going to be 4 weeks away when it did. The Concord's response to Chen's message took 6 weeks, not because deliberation took that long. The deliberation, by all accounts from the intelligence sources the Compact now maintained inside the Concord structure, was fast. Within 48 hours of the survey report arriving, Vrethnal's faction was already preparing a position. The 6 weeks were the Concord being the Concord. Process, review, committee, subcommittee, formal acknowledgement of receipt, drafting of a response, review of the draft, amendment, review of the amendment, and finally, on a Thursday, because things in this story happen on Thursdays and Tuesdays, and the calendar does not care about historical significance, a formal reply. The reply said, in the careful language of an institution that had been doing this for 900 years and was very practiced at saying things that sounded like concessions while not being concessions. The Galactic Concord acknowledges the formation of the Free Worlds Compact and notes with interest the participation of current Concord member species in its founding. The Concord reaffirms the right of all member species to engage in voluntary cooperative frameworks outside Concord administrative jurisdiction, subject to the terms of their existing membership agreements. The Concord further notes that the situation of the UES Providence colonists is under administrative review and that a resolution is expected within the standard review period. Standard review period was 6 months. Chen read the reply. She set it down. She thought about the gallery applauding. She sent back 3 sentences. Thank you for your acknowledgement. The standard review period is not acceptable. The colonists come home in 30 days or we make other arrangements. This is the second formal request. The Concord escalated to a diplomatic session. A formal meeting attended by 3 senior Concord officials with Chen and 2 UER diplomats, held at a neutral station in the outer fringe. It lasted 4 hours. The Concord argued procedure. Chen argued people. When the Concord representative suggested that the situation was more complex than a simple custody question, Chen put 3 things on the table: the drive specifications, a full technical briefing on the compact's 43 void installations, and a preliminary roster of the 11 Concord member species, who were now also compact members. Not as threats, as information. I want you to understand what exists, she said. Not as a negotiating position, as a factual briefing. This is what has been built in the space your exclusion zone gave us to build it. The drive, the network, the compact. She looked at the 3 Concord officials. You expelled us to make us go away. We didn't go away. We went further. She paused. In another 18 months, if current expansion rates hold, the Free Worlds Compact will have more member species than the Galactic Concord had when it was founded 900 years ago. In 3 years, with current outpost development, our industrial capacity will exceed Earth's pre-expulsion Concord capped output by a factor of 12. She looked at each of them in turn. We are not asking you to recognize us out of necessity. We don't need your recognition. We are offering you the opportunity to have a relationship with us before the question of what kind of relationship to have becomes significantly more complicated. The colonists came home in 19 days, not 30. 19. The Concord released them 4 days after the meeting, before the 30-day deadline, without a formal announcement, just a quiet administrative transfer. The Providence's colonists boarded on a civilian transport and delivered to UER custody at the exclusion zone boundary. 800 people. 800 people who had been in Concord custody for 15 months, who came off the transport into the UER reception facility on the edge of human space, blinking in light that wasn't Concord managed, breathing recycled air that wasn't Concord monitored. Chen was there when they arrived. She had made the trip from the Nexus personally, 4 days each way at 42 light years per day, which still astonished her every time she did the math, because some things you had to be present for. She stood in the reception bay and watched 800 people come through the transfer hatch. Families, children who had been 3 years old when the Providence was seized and were now almost 5. Engineers and scientists and colonists who had signed up to build something new and had spent 15 months in administrative limbo instead. They came through confused, cautious, carrying the specific wariness of people who had been in someone else's custody long enough to stop trusting quickly. A woman came through with a 4-year-old on her hip. The child looked at the reception bay, the UER banners, the Earth flag, the faces that weren't Concord uniform faces, and said something to her mother in a voice too low to hear across the bay. The mother looked up. She was looking for something. She found Chen's face. She held Chen's eyes for a moment. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Chen nodded. She stayed until the last person came through. On the transport back to the Nexus, Colonel Reeves brought her the latest compact expansion numbers. 3 new outpost certifications. 2 more contact missions successfully completed. Membership applications from 4 species currently under internal deliberation. Not the 23, not the original group, but new species, species that had heard about the compact through second and third-hand channels and had sent quiet inquiries through whatever routes they could find. 47 potential member species at current count. The Galactic Concord had 52 founding members at its formation, 900 years ago. Reeves, Chen said, not looking up from the data. Admiral. At current expansion rate. When do we hit 52 member species? He checked his projection. 14 months, he said. Chen set down the data tablet. She looked at the viewport, the dark between stars, the void that had been a sentence and had become a foundation, and she thought about the gallery that had applauded, about the word mercy, used 3 times, about the transport home from the Concord chamber, the moment when she had decided what not whether. She thought about what the Concord had intended to build, a quarantine, a fence, a demonstration that a small young civilization could be contained and forgotten if the right procedures were followed. She thought about what they had actually built. "Get some sleep, Duke," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Reeves said. He didn't move immediately. He was looking at the same viewport, the same dark. "Do you think they understand yet? The Concord? Do they understand what they made possible when they threw us out?" Chen thought about it. "They will," she said. "In about 14 months. She picked up the data tablet. Outside the viewport, the stars moved past, not slowly, not at the pace of a species that had been told what speed it was permitted to travel. Fast. At 42 light years per day. At the speed of a civilization that had stopped asking permission. 14 months. The largest empire in history would not call itself an empire. Chen had been specific about that in the Compact's founding language. No emperor, no emperor's titles, no hierarchy that placed one civilization above another. They were a compact of equals, of free worlds, of species that had found each other in the dark. But the galaxy was going to look at what they built, and they were going to have to find a word for it. And whatever word they chose, it was going to mean, do not try to banish these people again. They know what to do with the dark.